Was FDR a good president?
No, he was one of the worst we ever had.
So we tried your experiment one time, and it was a disaster. All right, since we're arguing the yes side, I'll make my case real quick, and then we'll see if you agree, Babs. I think that Congress is basically irrelevant at this point. Everything's done through the executive, and the problem is we have entrenched bureaucrats through the executive, and the problem is it's those same people that are running things as is right now. If we abolish term limits, what we would have is like Obama on his 4th or 5th term, and the voice of the people would be even less and more drowned out. Being an incumbent's a huge advantage, which would mean that someone like Obama, who had charisma and had a bunch of big money behind him, would in perpetuity make decisions for this country, and it would lead to even more of a disaster than we have today.
I think the converse is just as likely that we would get some amazing president in, and people would just keep voting that guy in.
Yeah, like, do you agree? Like, I thought if there would be any president who could actually fund their own campaign better than anybody, it would be Trump. As far as at least like what we've seen in the last probably 20 years, the only one who could actually be able to fund their own campaign. Trump could definitely do it over and over again. But not only that, don't you think that if the Republicans had, I think the main problem with Republican politics and what we've seen is that, you know, the Republican congressmen, their whole motive is just to go, we're not going to vote on anything the president wants, and then we can just bitch and moan when the Democrats are in power. But if we actually had a long-term goal through the executive that Republicans could actually get behind, you know, I think that would be actually a much more effective system for actually getting the policy changes that we want. Because it's not, well, even if we get it passed in 4 years, they're just going to undo it.
Well, no, I don't think that would change anyways. Babs, if you want to get in, I don't want to dominate time, but it wouldn't change anyways because the status quo would solve that problem because they would still think, well, Trump or his heir apparent in this point, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, whoever it be, will lose. They would think the same thing. Just because right now, do you think if Trump was allowed to run for a 3rd term, all of a sudden Congress would be like, oh, then let's pass the SAVE Act? I don't. I think they'd be like, fuck this guy. He'll lose because we're not doing anything.
He would have more time to push through the things he wants to get.
No, he wouldn't, because he wouldn't have won.
Instead of having a rushing. No, if he keeps winning and he gets a 3rd term and a 4th term, then he has much longer.
But that's a big if. And we can see the problem. Do you think Trump's 1st term was better than his 2nd term?
No, I think he's got more done in his 2nd term.
Really?
Nah,
yeah.
No.
Steelborn, what do you think about that?
No, I think he got more done in his 1st term.
Yeah, and I think that part of the problem is the more that Trump's there, the worse.
He also had a full. That you're comparing 4 years to 2 years to a year and a half.
Of course, right? But we're looking right now, and I think that you can see a trajectory that things would be getting worse. Again, the problem is, if I can, let's see if you agree with this. The 2 philosophical positions here would be, A, my position that there is a problem with entrenched bureaucrats that end up losing competency or becoming corrupt after they're there for so long, i.e. Joe Biden.
Get a bad king and things are bad.
The positive is, who are these leaders to say that the American people shouldn't have a voice? If they choose to say this guy should be there for 12 years like FDR, why shouldn't we let them? That's basically the principles we're arguing here, right?
I agree. That would be one argument I would make is you're actually if we're going to do democracy, you're actually hindering me from voting for the best man for the job because of some arbitrary number. You're picking 2 terms.
Some arbitrary standard. You can only be president twice. Why is that the standard that we set exactly?
But you see, you guys don't really agree with this. You might disagree in this, but you don't agree with the principle because there's all sorts of arbitrary metrics you would put on because you know the truth that the people are fucking stupid. And it's okay to have like arbitrary things in there to limit the power of the people to be stupid.
But I think part of what makes
arbitrary if it's got a purpose and it's not without system.
Well, it's arbitrary. For example, the voting age of 18 is sort of arbitrary, right?
Well, and no, yet it wasn't arbitrary. The reason we set the age at 18 was because 18-year-old men were forced to sign up for the draft.
Okay, do you believe there should be a voting age?
18-year-olds to vote.
Do you believe should there be an age that you have to be to vote?
Should there be a minimum requirement?
Yeah, sure.
I would say yeah.
Okay, whatever that number is will be arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary if it has a system behind it. So like the reason why it was set for 18 for men was because Nixon was the one who did this because of the fact that 18-year-old men had to sign up for the draft.
It doesn't matter, right? It's still arbitrary in the fact that you can say, but the very metrics that would be for why you have to sign up for the draft is arbitrary itself because we assume some sort of physical or mental competency or wisdom that's necessary for that. So that instead what you're saying it's not arbitrary because it relies on this other metric, which by the way is arbitrary.
It's just a whataboutism. This is just a whataboutism. Like
relevant to the part of what we're actually talking about.
It's not whataboutism.
We could argue about voting age.
What I'm saying is you have to concede that there is a problem with entrenched bureaucrats. We see it all through our Congress. We see it all through the executive, right? On the
Yeah,
other
that's
hand,
why I would probably have a term limit on Congress, but not on presidents.
okay, on the other hand, right, what we see is that there is certainly limits that we put on people. We and their right to vote. We put all sorts of limits.
You know what? Part of what
Why would it be different on Congress than on the president?
because
What's the difference?
because I don't want.
Because the problem with Congress is that you can't hold any congressman accountable because there's a whole bunch of different congressmen. Whereas if the president does what you don't like, you can actually hold the president more accountable because it's one fucking guy.
To the
It's easier
opposite,
to hold one person accountable.
The exact opposite's true, right? Like, actually, it's easy to hold that one person. All you need is a local amount of people in their district to vote against them. You might still not like what the rest of
Yeah,
Congress
but
is
most
doing.
people don't pay attention to what Congress does, Rob. You and I both know that.
But
Most
again,
people don't pay attention to what Congress does, but everybody pays attention to what the fucking
I
president
can't believe, Stillborn, you went for this. What a huge trap you fall into. The actual philosophical position that you agreed with, that this is a question about stopping entrenched bureaucracy versus having people have the right to vote.
That's not the only argument.
Let me finish. You immediately concede, oh, but we should limit people's right to vote when it comes to Congress and have an arbitrary limit.
No, I didn't say we should limit that. That's not what I said. I said
You agreed with the term limit for Congress.
I was giving a descriptor of what is just now.
Oh, I did. I don't know if he did.
Well, okay, so on our opposition side, Steelborn disagrees with term limits for Congress. JS agrees with term limits for Congress. That's the position?
Yeah.
So whataboutism is totally irrelevant to what we're talking about.
What do you mean? It's not a whataboutism because from
Hold
JS.
on. Rob, was the prompt about whether or not congressmen should have term limits or presidents?
But when you're talking
about the
about
same role,
do you know what the term whataboutism? Do you know what the term whataboutism?
Why don't we ask about those too while we're at it?
Do you know what the term whataboutism? When you say, I think that a big reason that we shouldn't have term limits is because we shouldn't have arbitrary metrics to prevent people from voting who they want. Oh, but I do believe that when it comes to Congress. That's not whataboutism to show that that's a value that you're not putting a lot of emphasis on. Because you're willing to throw it out the window when it comes to another office. That's not whataboutism. That's saying the reason you have for your position is
random or arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary.
It wouldn't,
Well, when you look at
it wouldn't be arbitrary because the problem is it's a lot easier to hold one person accountable than it is to hold 400 fucking people accountable.
But you're not holding 400 accountable. You're still holding one person
Yeah.
when you're voting for Congress. I don't get to vote for 400 people. I get to vote for one. I
There's
can hold
also-
that person accountable.
There's also less interest in smaller elections and things like Congress and governors and mayors. So you get more not low propensity voters, but like informed voters going and doing their local elections and stuff. So they can change them out more frequently. But a national election, you have all the masses just show up and vote.
So just to be clear, in the congressional elections, you guys' argument is that's generally a higher percentage of more educated voters.
Usually people who are more interested in politics are more likely to vote in smaller elections.
We should limit those more educated voters and saying, nope, you don't get to vote for the person you want because of term limits. But the less educated people that are voting for president who are making worse decisions, hypothetically, because they're less educated, we should say, oh, no, you can't limit their choice. How does that make sense? If anything, it would be the opposite. You limit the less educated people.
When was term limits added into the United States? And the presidency.
After FDR, I believe.
80s?
Yeah, it was after FDR, right? But the way our system used to be set up was actually we used to have it so that the state representatives were the only people who voted for the president.
Correct.
And those presidents didn't have term limits.
Right, but we changed the way we vote. Right? Like, for example, senators, etc. What does this have to do with anything? We're saying
that's why when you say Americans are dumb, it's because the way our system is set up, we can't even go 2 years without our pendulum swinging back and forth, and we're constantly divided.
How many presidents have served more than 2 terms?
Look at Canada.
How many?
I don't care about Canada.
How many presidents have served more than 2 terms?
I don't know off the top of my head. If you want me to look it up, I will.
I think it's just FDR. Am I incorrect about that?
It's 1 or 2.
I think it's just FDR. Was he good?
Wasn't there like a Woodrow Wilson? Something maybe 1 or 2.
Was FDR a good president?
No, he was one of the worst we ever had.
So we tried your experiment one time, and it was a fucking disaster.
Okay, well, regardless whether it's the United States.
There's plenty of
or
presidents who
Canada,
attempted it a third
what
term.
I'm trying to say
that's
is in Canada.
We've also had kings that ruled empires for.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, Babs. Go ahead. Yeah, they're.
Thank you.
No, we can't hear you. All I hear is wah 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 wah.
Wow, that was really good. Came up with that all night.
I'm sorry, Babs. I didn't hear your point because JS
Thank
misogynistic ass.
In Canada, speakeasy was correct. that there is no limit. So look what happens with Canada and something like Trudeau. Trudeau has no limit. He just kept getting voted in. For 10 forking years, he was voted in.
I don't care about
And-
Canada.
No.
Yeah, we don't. Canada is
There's
irrelevant.
a
Okay,
point.
let's
This
American
has
People Top
nothing-
Hat is irrelevant
Okay,
to America.
listen.
I got a
Listen.
point. I got a minute left.
Linda,
How about if
listen.
we
Oh
elect
my
a
God.
35-year-old president?
When
He has a
you
90%
literally
approval
have
rate. Everybody
somebody-
loves him. He does 8 years.
Oh my God.
He's now 43 years old, and he's running for a third term. Why can't we vote for him? We have to vote for this new
When
demon we
you
don't
have
know.
somebody that is constantly voted in, the country starts to go to their policies. It starts to flip to their policies.
that mean?
So if you don't have a limit on somebody, the country will start to become that person's policies instead of there being a
And
change.
if I could,
And without, go ahead.
and
Yes.
I'll piggyback up what Babs is saying. One, the reason to look to Canada is it's probably the country most similar to us, and we see how it's a disaster
Yes.
there. Secondly, to answer your question, JS, why should we limit the person who has 90% approval rating? I don't know. You tell me. You think we should do it for Congress?
It didn't work for Canada. What makes you think it's going to work?
Yeah,
for the United States?
I could let you argue me out of that. I could say fine.
Well, convenient in a
Congress.
12-minute debate here that you're making arguments that are contradictory to the overall point that you're trying to make.
No.
But it's what we can see.
We
is,
could have a separate
Hold
debate
on,
over
real
whether
quick.
Congress should have term limits. I'm sure there's
Real quick,
arguments
Rob, do
for
you
why
think
they
if the
should and
United
why they
States, hold on, real
shouldn't.
quick, Rob, do you think that if the United States had Teddy Roosevelt for more terms than just the 2 terms, that it would have been better off?
I don't know. I think as an individual, it
asking
could
your
have been.
intuition.
It could have been right, like as opposed to who? Woodrow Wilson? Yeah, sure. But fuck, I mean, even JS would have been a better president than Woodrow Wilson, and I ain't saying much. But no, the point that I'm trying to make is even Theodore Roosevelt, what would have happened was inevitably the entrenched power itself becomes something that the power of the character would outweigh, and the institutional advantages, his ability to be an effective
real quick,
leader.
Rob, have there ever been kings who actually ruled justly and they didn't just abuse the shit out of their power?
Sure, but what we should do is look
So
comparatively.
why didn't it happen with those kings? Why could the kings rule for a long time without actually, just
You're
like-
saying
if
absolute
that's- if
power
that-
corrupts absolutely.
I can answer this quickly because the argument is that we don't say, is it a possibility? We say, on average, would it be good or not? And if you're right that kings prove this is wrong, then why didn't the founding fathers say, we'll just have a king? There have
I
been
think
good
that we should have
kings,
done that. I think that George Washington should have put on the fucking crown.
but why didn't these people wiser than you who said, wait a minute, we
Hold on, who said
absolutely
they were
do
wiser than
not
me? They
want
were
a
full of
king?
enlightenment philosophy and a bunch of unjustified acts.
Because they were mad about the
None of it was
king
incoherent.
situation
None of
they
it made
just
any
left.
sense.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
The fact your argument is if there have been kings that have worked out, that proves that term limits shouldn't exist. And my argument is, but if that argument's true, then it would also be true that we would have just, our founding fathers who were incredibly wise would have said, then we'll just have a king. Instead, they wanted limits.
Yes.
No, George Washington
Not only
just kinda
that, when you're
arbitrarily
looking at
decided
things
that.
like senators,
He
they,
didn't want to
and
be
they
king.
don't change.
No,
I
it
mean,
is
they're
true.
literally starting to side with the power. They start
it-
siding with the power, and it further drifts that power.
And it is true that there wasn't a term limit for presidency, and George Washington decided he should only be there for 2 times. And that's why almost everyone prior to Theodore Roosevelt made that decision, because they saw how damaging it could be for one person, because they understood how damaging a king was. They didn't want that much power vested in one person. That's why George Washington and the founding fathers tipped their cap and largely
There's still a system of
agreed.
checks and balances. There's still a system of checks and balances where the Supreme Court or the legislative
Dude.
branch could check the president, even if he runs for
Yeah.
multiple terms, past 2 terms.
I suppose they could. How's that working out right now? How's Congress doing? The corrupt court system and the do-nothing Congress. They
Yeah.
can't
What, you
even
mean
get a
the ones that are constantly
90%
checking our
bill
president
passed.
because he's only got 4 years left, and then they can put another fucking Democrat who's going to come in and undo everything that he did, or if he could run for a 3rd term where he could actually say, fuck these people, fuck this Congress, we can actually get some shit done.
If there were no term limits, he would have never won because Obama would be there. You know that, and I know that as well.
You think that Obama would still be there?
He would have beat
100%,
Trump.
100%.
Yeah. Because not
You would
only,
think that.
yes, because he has the institutional advantages, right? And you would have had more of an incentive for people to lobby him. For example, look at how all of a sudden, like the Clinton Foundation don't mean shit, right? You know what I mean? Now, if Clinton would have been, if
I mean, that
like
could have to do
Obama
with
would
them
have
being
been
in the
allowed to be
Epstein
president.
files, and
What's that?
that could have to do with them being in the Epstein files and
For
then
fuck-
murdering a
God's
guy.
sakes, it stopped in 2016 when she lost.
We also don't, you're assuming that it would have been Obama, but how do we know that Bush wouldn't have continued to be president?
Bush was very unpopular going into 2008. You know that. He wouldn't have stood a chance with the financial
think
crisis plus the Iraq war. So
you see how people rally behind.
The point is, the principle is, we understand. We all see it with If you're out there and you're wondering, in the audience, do you like the fact that Joe Biden was in politics for 47 years? Do you like the fact that Dianne Feinstein was there until she was an old goat?
He didn't
Mitch
win a second
McConnell
elec-
right
he
now can't stay conscious, and yet
Yes, he
he's
couldn't.
elected to positions of leadership.
He couldn't get
That's
elected
what would
twice.
happen
Kamala.
that's what would happen to the president.
Right, he couldn't get elected twice.
Because
Who?
he gave it up to Kamala. He was too freaking old and too
Right.
mentally inept to be able to do it. But
Well,
the
that's
thing is,
gonna happen.
Canada, as much as
It's
you want
the
to say you
president.
don't give a shit about Canada, Canada is the exact perfect example of how a dynasty works. Canada is most directly related to the United States. And if you're going to look at anything about being able to keep voting in people nonstop, look at Canada. Does it work for us?
Well,
Look
you
how
guys
fucked
keep
up we
assuming that
are.
it's going to be a left winger who gets in for multiple terms. What is the
Because
what is the
it has
argument?
been a
Hold on,
left
real quick, real
winger
quick.
the majority of the
Hold on.
time.
What is the argument that what is the argument that it wouldn't be a right winger? And by the way, the reason it's a left winger is because they've been importing the fucking third world into Canada for the last 20 fucking years, who have been voting in these left wingers and going, if you keep bringing more third worlders, we'll keep voting for the left. But if you put
Thank
a
you
fucking
for
kibosh
proving
to
the
that
point.
shit and it's fucking right wing populist
Yeah.
policies that keep getting pushed through, who's to say that that's not what's going to happen for the next fucking 20 to 30 years?
The
What is
absolute
the
power.
argument for that?
You
Why that
literally
wouldn't
just
happen?
said
I'll
why.
answer.
You literally just said why.
The absolute
ahead.
power corrupts absolutely argument is moot because both sides can make that same argument. So just
Again,
like we could get a bad guy for 40 years, we could get a really awesome
Right,
guy
and so
for 40 years.
That's why your position makes no sense. It's a coin flip. It could be a really
Yes.
good guy or a really bad guy. My argument is,
no,
we always
let me,
have the
that's why that
violent
argument
option.
is
We always
moot.
have the
That's
option of violence, Rob.
Let me-
That's
let
the thing
me-
you're not considering.
okay, well, we have the option of violence with term limits. That again
So
is
I'm
a
giving
moot
you
point
another
because it's something
argument.
that exists regardless. What
At
I'm
least
Do you
saying
agree
is,
though?
would
Do
have
you think
I'm
people
saying
are
with-
more likely to revolt if they know that in 4 years this person is not going to get kicked out?
No, I disagree. I think people would actually be as equally likely to use violence if there were term limits or not. The idea that you're trying to make the argument that somehow people
Well,
that
have
would
more
throw it-
monarchies or democracies been overthrown,
Let's
Rob?
walk through this argument. Like, you interrupted me to make this bullshit argument. So your argument is this: people will vote in the popular vote for the same president over and over again, third, fourth term, and that will lead to a revolt.
No, I'm saying no. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying.
Then
that
what are
if-
you
if-
talking about to interrupt
Because
me
hold
to
on,
say
Rob,
this bullshit?
do you think that people are more or less likely to revolt if they know, well, this guy's going to get out? He's going to get kicked out in 4 years.
It doesn't.
We don't need to have a violent
But
revolt.
but
It's
again,
going to change in 4 years.
And you're,
That doesn't make any
your
sense.
question makes
We
no
see
sense.
violence
There
even
is
with
no
the term
any
limits.
system where so then there was more likely to be a violent revolt with FDR because he had a third term.
I would say you would have a higher likelihood of a violent revolt.
So
with
your
something like
argument
that.
is we should
Wrong.
eliminate term limits so we have a violent revolution.
No, we should eliminate term limits so people can actually get a long-term goal done. Where it's like, do
Yes.
you agree with me that you're not gonna be able to fix this economy in 4
Oh my
fucking
God.
years?
No, that's
Not
why
gonna
I
happen.
This
Again-
is my argument. It's a consistency thing. It's about
How
Alright,
do you
how
do a
that's nothing-
long-term plan when you have
We
4
see that-
fucking
alright.
years? 8 at most.
Japan will have an empire for 100 years, and they plan things out in China. They plan things out far ahead. We are this fucking crazy
They're
pendulum that
communist.
it goes back and forth. We're not even going to be. We're going to
So
lose
just
the
to be
midterm.
clear, so if I can real quick before you two
Americans
interrupt
can't
again,
go 2
I get
years
it.
without changing their mind.
So we can't use Canada as an example because that's a non sequitur,
Yeah.
but we're going to use China, Japan, etc., which are countries far less like us. Secondly,
And
the
communists.
argument is you're right, it could be a good person or a bad person. What I'm saying is we can see, even if that's true, which moots it out, we can see that in the status quo it would have most likely been a bad person like Obama. And what happens is you allow them to entrench power and get worse and worse. They get to be more corrupt. They have more money and lobbyists that put into there, which means they're more likely to win, and they get worse and worse. That's why our founding fathers and George Washington decided 2 terms is enough. We don't want to vest so much power in one person.
Our founding
And
fathers
in
didn't
addition to
decide
that,
that.
all we have
Yeah,
to
our
do
founding fathers
every
didn't decide that.
last point, I promise. Then you
Well,
can
you don't
interrupt
just
and
get
do
to
what you
split
want.
that in there. Our
The
founding
last thing
fathers
is,
didn't decide
why
that. They
is it you
decided
say
against
we need
it.
consistency? We had it 47 years of Joe Biden, Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell. How's that looking? How's Congress looking with that consistency? Where we have octogenarians that have been there for 40 years that don't give a fuck what their constituents say because their institutional advantage is so great, even if they're a fucking brain dead moron who's drooling on themselves, they're going to get reelected.